Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Centimetre Perfect AFL podcast. We have made it through one round of the season, or one and a half if you count opening round of 2025. And to everyone who did pre-season predictions, ourselves included, we are legally allowed to do them again because Fremantle, Port Adelaide, Carlton, what are you doing, guys? That was a really odd round of footy, Liam, and I've got to say, we waited 6 months for some of these teams to return, and oh, doctor, I really wish I waited another 6 months for at least one of those teams.
Yes, I do agree with you, Jesse. And look, I do this every episode. Before we go any further, move that microphone closer to your mouth, boy.
Do you want to hear me more?
I want to hear you more, yes. No, it was a very strange round of footy, Jesse. We've got lots to talk about when it comes to the game recaps today. A couple of lads talking a bit of footy. What more do you want? What do you want, expert analysis from actual AFL players or former AFL players? Hell no. What do they know? You want a couple of lads talking some shit. Isn't that right, Jesse?
Well, the one thing we have on our side is we don't rage bait. In fact, I usually get rage baited by things that annoy me. So really, it's like you're getting the best of both worlds here. You're getting some analysis. I'd like to say some comedy, although that's probably quite generous. And hopefully a bit of fun. And of course, if you are subscribed to our YouTube channel, Centimetre Perfect, which, you know, you should be, you'll also get our weekly preview show, Just the Tips, where we try to out-duel each other in a battle where football tipping takes on that little bit of extra complication, but a lot more extra fun with our confidence point system. So head over to YouTube and have a look on that if you are listening on one of our preferred podcasting platforms. If you are watching us on YouTube for the main show, hello, you can see us and we can't see you. That's not how this works. It's not a live audience. At CMPerfect_AFL for all your socials as well. We pinky promise to start posting more on those as the season ramps up.
Jesse, now, we're just a couple of guys with a hobby and a dream. You know, who's got time for Instagram?
You sound like you're trying to elevator pitch me some burger restaurant. No, I'm not making a beef and truffle burger restaurant on the corner of some Leaderville dodgy shop front with your lab. Listen, not happening.
Jesse, I'm a millennial. That speaks to me. A beef and truffle burger sounds right up my alley, and I will pay for it. You know that I will.
Your Jesse, shout on Sunday.
Well, that's fair, but you're just going to have a regular kids meal, right?
Oh, yeah, of course. If you think I'm not going to have my little cheeseburger and my 8 fries for $9.
One slider and a swan, please. Done. Jesse sorted for the day.
Not while I'm training for a half marathon, unfortunately.
Good boy. You're a good lad. Now, we've got a lot of games to talk about today, so we're going to jump straight into a little bit of news. Where should we start, Jesse? Should we start with our match review, our MRO findings from the week? Some interesting calls, interesting decisions, and at least one interesting non-challenge, in my opinion. Where should we begin?
Let's start with the Archer incident, because I feel like that's been the most polarizing. And let's start right off the bat, nice and early, by saying we're already punishing the result, not the action, which is a big red flag for me in the context of a contact sport. Now, nobody liked seeing what happened at Marvel on Saturday night. No. I don't think there's a single person except for weirdos who enjoyed that collision and the immediate aftermath of it. Luke Beveridge storming out of the box to make sure he could get down there and provide that pastoral care almost as the coach of the footy club. I think really did sum up the situation perfectly. But if anyone believes, or the AFL Tribunal believes that Jackson Archer intended for that to happen, I would seriously question their ability to trust the human race. Now, I'm not a trusting person, but that was a pretty clear accident to me, where you have two players broadly going for the ball.
Yeah.
So why are we here?
Yeah, well, I think this is it's always going to be the point of contention with these kind of suspensions and decisions made by, like, we understand protecting the players is always paramount. However, there has to be the understanding that there are going to be some instances within a game of footy that are unavoidable. Now, the AFL has deemed that this was avoidable. Apparently, Archer was supposed to magically stop on a dime within a split second and make that decision. It all happened very fast. Apparently, he was going too hard at the ball. Like, AFL has I think had to come and jump through a few hoops of logic to get to their upholding of this suspension. Because I kind of agree, Jesse. Like, what do we want? We want to keep the players safe, absolutely. But are we also trying to completely bring the game to an absolute standstill? Are we actually trying to get them to stop running, stop going hard at the football? Like, which way is it going to be? Because we celebrate that. We celebrate in this game that players go hard and they go for the footy and the courage. It's such a massive word within our sport. Then something like this happens, and you're like, well, it was unfortunate. We obviously hope that Cleary is okay. I believe he's been cleared of anything major, which is fantastic news. But at the end of the day, like, I just don't know what Archer's supposed to do in that situation. So it's a bit of a tricky one. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of people. Apparently, he was getting abuse over the fence, like from some of the Bullies fans, which I don't think was necessarily warranted.
I mean, that's probably going to happen. Like,
yeah, but
is it correct? No. But heat of the moment.
Sure. But it reminds me of the old Blues, Silvani clash with the guy's name I always get wrong. So you're going to tell me who it is. Thank you very much. Like that calls for, like, over the fence vitriol.
That calls for very angry Carlton supporters clambering over the interchange structure to hurl abuse to Darren Milburn at all costs.
And the two policemen, they're going off. We're in over our heads here. We're in a bit of trouble if this gets out of hand. That called for it. This, I don't think so. Not so much. But I understand your point. Heat of the moment, your player's just gone down. You stick up for your boys, and I suppose in that situation it was there. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting season if that's how it's going to play out.
Well, let's move on to just one final point before we do move on, because you said that courage is such a big word in the game, and you're right. But to me, right now, there's a bigger word in the game, and it's an issue I've brought up with relative consistency since we debuted this podcast, and that word is litigation. Now, we know for a fact that the AFL are under a significant microscope, facing multiple either current or potential legal actions for negligence with CTE, concussion, medical malpractice. I mean, we saw, it's not a concussion, but we saw the level of discomfort and frustration that Christian Petrarca's camp held out of the way that situation was handled in the King's Birthday public holiday game against Collingwood last year. Mm-hmm. I don't agree with the 3 weeks, personally, but I understand why the AFL are doing this. They are coming across as terrified of further litigation, and probably rightfully so. I mean, we're seeing this trend or this awareness around CTE globally, but you see it at different levels. American football is very much focused around the impact and the helmet side of things. You've got association football or soccer where the focus is very much on heading the ball. And then you look at footy, which is probably more of your collisions, your head clashes, those type of things. Not necessarily deliberate actions, but your inadvertent actions are a result of legal parts of the game. Mm-hmm. So I suspect this is a landmark case for the AFL Tribunal, and something that we'll see. I mean, this arguably goes back 11 years for when Fife was sanctioned for an accidental head clash against Gold Coast at Domain in 2014. Similar rulings have been around for a very long time. You just get the sense that as much as fans and past players saw Will Schofield making his thoughts very clear on X that he wasn't a fan of the decision, as much as that element exists, I don't think we're going to see the end of this being the status quo going forward.
Yep, hard to disagree. We'll move on to some of the other things. Tom Lynch had a 1-game ban upheld for a high bump on Tom De Koning. And Scrimshaw, which I thought was quite funny, they try to argue that away. 3 weeks for throwing his fist at someone's head. There was one other one from the weekend, which involved Starcevic from the Brisbane Lions. And sorry, remind me, Jesse, who was the guy who made the bump again? McInerney?
Yeah.
McInerney. Now, on looking at the footage, it appears as if it's a fair bump. Hip and shoulder, right? I'm not too sure if there's other angles that show head contact, because I don't believe the Swans have challenged it. But that was 3 weeks for causing Starcevic, who's had a concussion history, another concussion. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Jesse, if you've seen anything else to the contrary. But to me, that just looked like a hip and shoulder on a guy who's unfortunately got a history of concussion issues. Why would that be a suspension if it's a hip and shoulder and there's no head contact? Tell me if I'm wrong.
Well, the AFL certainly has a different view at the moment, and the AFL's view is that there is a significantly heightened duty of care for players on the field, irrespective of whether there's a team or opposition, to, I guess, look out for each other. Now, we've seen memos go out from AFL House regarding pushing players into marking contests as a result of a couple of incidents in preseason and round zero. So I think we are getting into a really difficult stage. And I think the big question that I have from this decision, and I've made my thoughts clear on the Archer. I don't think I think at the very least it's a very harsh decision on Archer to be given 3 weeks at best case scenario. But I want to see a test case for this in round 24. And that's not to say I want to see a player injured. No. But if we're going to have one of these incidents again this season, and again, it'd be preferable if we didn't, I want it to be around 24, and I want it to be involving a player who is contending in that top 4 bracket, because we are going to see how serious the AFL are about this, or whether it's straddling the line of performative in an irrelevant part of the season.
I don't even think it has to be around 24, really. If it happens during the season for a top team or a top player in any team.
Even that.
Yeah, to see if they hold the same level of action. Because, I don't know, the McInerney one it didn't seem like it was warranted of anything. And now here we are, 3 weeks later, he's got himself if that bump was on anybody else outside of Starcevic, who's obviously got history, and they got up and kept playing, we're talking nothing. We're talking and the commentators even said, "Oh, great bump." Usually it's pretty obvious and cut and dry when it's bad. But we said we weren't going to talk too long on this. We have a little bit, but that's okay, because I think it's an interesting look into what we can expect for season 2025. Jesse, anything else we should cover off before we jump straight into the games? We've got a lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of interesting results, a lot of upsets, confusion, some shellackings, some misery for some.
Two one-liners to touch on. Darcy Moore is the new president-elect of the AFL Players Association, with Patrick Dangerfield stepping down. I didn't actually put any thought into who would be the new president once Dangerfield announced he was going to walk away, but it makes complete sense it's going to be Darcy Moore. And Tasmania have revealed their new mascot. It is a pinata. And if the on-field success is going to be anything in the realm of this pinata, they are going to be terrible.
If you haven't seen it, I'll chuck a picture up on the screen now so you can see it. Look at the state of that.
Oh, my goodness me.
Look at the state of it. What were they thinking?
Well, the good thing is about this, right? It's clearly a pinata. We can see it's a pinata.
Yeah.
Cadbury have a factory in Tasmania. I would argue this is just ease of access.
I'm going to put this side by side with a mascot in Japan. Now, Japan loves their mascots.
They do.
And I'm just going to quickly bring it up.
Even the creepy Tokyo Olympic mascots aren't as creepy or objectively horrible as this.
Honestly, Jesse, when you see Melon Kuma or Melon Bear side by side, you'll be like, okay, that's where I've got the inspiration from. It's a terrifically scary looking thing. All right, enough of that. Enough of that. We got games to talk about. 9 games. We've got a full complement of games to talk about this week before we start the buys from the opening round next week. Let's jump in, Jesse. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
We're going to start off with one of the upsets of the year. One of the games for the ages. Richmond, 13 goals for 82, defeating Carlton 9-15. 69 at the MCG in front of 80,009 people. Well, we have already one of the strangest, most bizarre, most terrifically exciting upsets to kick off the year. You had everyone expecting Carlton. Everyone was saying that if Carlton didn't win this by more than 10 goals, it was a loss. And they just lost straight up in a game that, I'm kind of not surprised we saw what we saw. You've got a Tigers team full of very young, very exciting players who I'm sure Uze has just been like, you know what, guys, let's just have a run. Let's. What is that? Is your smoke alarm going off?
That is the smoke alarm.
For your entire building?
Yep. It's someone set it off.
Fantastic. You look like you're really stressing. Do we have to pause, Jesse, or are we good to
No,
push
we
on?
have to pause. No.
Okay, let's pause. All right, we're back after that little interruption of Jesse's fire alarm going off. Everything okay, Jesse?
Yeah, I think just the talk on this podcast got too hot to handle, and it threatened to incinerate the suburb. But no, look, this was an incredible game of football, Liam, to your point. It was a game that, like, I think we said this on the previous show on Just the Tips, that the expectation on Carlton was always going to be difficult to satisfy.
Yeah.
And I think that got in the heads of the playing group a little bit. Now, a couple of key statistics here really stood out for me because across the board, these two sides were bang even. If not Carlton overperforming, yet individual players like McGovern, Sard, Silvani, the individual games from some of these experienced, generally serviceable players, I think you can throw Williams in this bracket as well for Carlton, they had absolute shockers. I mean, Mitch McGovern directly at fault for 4 goals, and I really should give him the 5th one because Armstrong kind of looked in his direction in the last quarter. He fell over, and then Armstrong laced that into the goal square for the easiest goal you're ever going to see. So really, it should be 5. That was a dreadful individual performance from Mitch McGovern. I don't think he needs me to come on here and tell him that. I'm sure he's aware.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
But I think what we saw from Carlton, and this is interesting because you look at Carlton in isolation on Thursday night when I went to bed, I thought, that is going to be a hard thing to top this round. And yet we arguably have two sides who have certainly gotten close, if not eclipsed Carlton in terms of oh dear. But, people were saying Richmond weren't going to win a game. Those people were a bit silly and carrying on a little bit of hyperbole in that. You're not going to see a team go winless in the modern AFL, I don't think, anymore. I understand that there can be pretty significant gulfs in class between top sides and bottom sides, but I just don't think that's realistic across a 25-week season.
Yeah.
But Carlton seemed to certainly think that was going to be the case. Richmond wouldn't go away. They're not the most polished team, but they got the game played on their terms. So Adam Uze has completely outcoached Michael Voss and dragged the consensus bottom side in the competition going into the season, dragged them into a situation where they can bully the opposition into playing the game style that they want. That's exactly what happened. Richmond's young core of players aren't disciplined. There's no Noah Bolter out there to help organise. So they're not going to be a well-drilled, robust defensive side. So you've got to make things happen. And, 13 goals for, we're not going to see that every week from them. But, they made opportunities and they took their opportunities. That's what wins you games of footy.
Yeah, 100%. Lawler was great in his opening game. Probably
wasn't he just?
He's living up to the Dusty Martin moniker, but I think he's going to want to form his own legacy, I would say. It's always nice in your first season to get compared to a great of the game, but I think very soon those will go away, those comparisons.
I feel he's a different player. I really see him more in but in terms of a style of player as well. I'm not saying, look, it's Dustin Martin every time I see him. I see a bit more of Gary Ablett Jr. In the way Lawler plays. There was the goal assist that he set up where he got the hand pass out of traffic and through the Carlton defence. I think it was in the second quarter. That really struck me as a player who just has more time than anyone else around him. And we see that with players like Ablett Jr., Pendlebury. I would throw David Mundy in there from a fair perspective, where time just seems to stand still for them, or at least slow down for them to be able to do whatever they please with the football. So he was excellent. Thought Armstrong showed some real solid glimpses as well for Richmond. Thought Camporelli had a great game for Carlton. But when you look at guys like Camporelli giving Chera and Walsh a bath in terms of how to use the football, that's a worry for Carlton. They have been humbled in a way that I don't think any other side in the competition has been humbled this season. And I don't know where these sides are going to finish up. I think Richmond will still finish towards that bottom. And Carlton, I think realistically with Charlie Kerner coming back this week, should be finishing in and amongst that top 8 contest. But I think more important than anything about that, we saw one of the games of the season. If you can seriously tell me that this shouldn't be the first game of the season in 2026,
Mm.
then, I actually don't know if I want to do a podcast with you anymore. Because this is the essence of Aussie rules. These two sides, I know it's a little bit Vic-centric, but these two are massive clubs, massive Victorian clubs. They draw a crowd. And what the 80,000 people that went through the gates on Thursday night saw was one of the best modern era games that I can recall.
I actually take credit for Richmond's comeback because it was right about the time when they were down by 41 points that I sent you a text that says, what are the over-unders on a 100-point thrashing here?
Oh, yes, you did say that.
I did say that. And basically, as soon as I sent that text message, guess what happened? This game flipped on its head. 41 points they were down by, and they managed to turn that around. Unreal. I agree with you, Jesse. I think this is the kind of game that we'd love to see. And I think there's another game we'll talk about a bit later that was close, but not a good game, but will be thought of as a classic. Thought of as a classic simply because it was a close game. This was fascinating. It was a fascinating game of football that had me watching the entire time. I didn't pick up my phone once. It was like,
that last quarter was just engrossing, wasn't it? It was
outside texting you. Like sometimes I watch a game of footy and it'll kind of be on, and I'll just be doing other stuff because it's like, footy. It's good, but sometimes when it's not your team and it's two teams, we're just watching it because we want to get some content for the podcast. You're like, okay, well, I could probably gather what's going on. Not this game. This game had me hook, line, and sinker. Goodness me. Wowee. What a way to start round one. Richmond getting the win over Carlton. Unbelievable. And hello to Richmond Gorringe. I'm sure he's having a great time as well. You see that?
I prefer not to talk about him because
Fair enough.
I very much try to stick with the mantra. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And when it comes to his content, I truly don't have anything nice to say.
Fair enough.
So let's move on to the Hollywood Hawks.
That was pretty funny, though. All right, let's go to the Hollywood Hawks. Here we go. Friday night at the MCG. The Hawks winners again, 17-9, 111, defeating the Bombers 12-13, 85. Spirited performance by the Bombers, I thought. I think we all thought this was going to be quite an easy win for the Hawks because of Essendon's kind of a bit depleted. They're a bit down on injuries at the moment, but they were brave, the Bombers. They were brave, but the Hawks kind of kept them at arm's length pretty much from the start.
Was it ever in doubt to you?
No.
Sans a goal that Essendon got in the third quarter that made me kind of sit up and say, oh, hello.
No,
it really felt like the Hawks were in complete control here.
I don't think they were ever in danger. No. They always had an answer. They always had them at arm's length. They never really got too close for it to be a problem for the Hawks, but the Hawks didn't look they were panicking at all.
No.
The Hawks were just going about their business as they've been doing last season and then also to start this season. And they're very fun to watch, Hollywood Hawks, as we keep saying. And Jesse, we haven't done the dance yet. Fun, Hawthorn win. Fun, Hawthorn win. Now, it's good to see them keep going, keep it up. They're going to be, I think, quite a formidable force this year. I think Hawthorn, they're going to go quite a long way. But it was brave by the Bombers. They did give it a red hot crack, and you can't fault them for that. But you said something very interesting. I think it was about this game in relation to their output for the game. Like they had to go at, it was Essendon, you were saying that they're going at 9 or 10 out of 10 just to kind of challenge the Hawks. Was that this game that you were talking about?
Yeah, it was this game. And I stand by that. And having rewatched some of the highlights and picked my way through the pieces, watching this, I felt Essendon didn't have any more to give than what they were going. I felt they were really at max output, whereas Hawthorn, I think they were probably 7 out of 10 in terms of their quality. I think had the game gotten closer, I still think Hawthorn would have been able to find the extra gear. Essendon kicked 12 goals, which I will give them credit for. I probably didn't see that coming with their forward line, but they've now lost Cole Langford. So this is a really, really alarming situation. Let's talk about the good, though, for the Bombers. I thought if you could have a team of 23 Jai Caldwells, I think you're going to go pretty well in a premiership season. He was unbelievable. Zach Merritt, we put him in the best because he did have a big statistical output game, but I also felt there was just bits and pieces missing from his game on Friday night. I wonder if it's a case of he doesn't necessarily have faith in some of his teammates at this stage. And look, that's probably understandable when you look at a few of them. But I just get the sense that Essendon right now are in a bit of a crisis because this team isn't good enough for finals. Let's get that on the table right now. This team isn't good enough for finals. They won't be making the 8. But I also don't necessarily think they're as bad as some of the other teams around them. Like, yes, they were going at pretty much max output on Friday night, in my view, but that would still beat a handful of teams in the competition, arguably fairly comfortably. So you now get in a situation where, and there's probably 2 or 3 clubs in this situation, I would say, in 2025, where you say, what is the point of this season? Guys like Kako, that's the point of the season. Caldwell, they've got to get these guys going. But you look at Kyle Langford. Kyle Langford's statistical output in the last 2 years has been extraordinary, specifically last year. But I've always said that seemed alarmingly peaky for him. Now, obviously, it's going to be hard to quantify that now he's gone down with an injury and will miss time. But, Peter Wright has been injured and or not in good form. There's no Jake Stringer in this forward line. I don't think Harrison Jones is anywhere near the level of leading a forward line in the AFL in 2025 in the absence of a Wright and or Langford. So this is interesting for the Bombers. I think there was some definite positives for them, but I think almost as weird as sounds, too many positives in the sense that I think they hit their ceiling in this game. And that doesn't leave them with a lot of room, especially given the Hawks that we'll talk about now. I don't think they really got much out of second, maybe a little bit of a throttle into third gear at times.
Yep. No, it's fair to say. It's fair to say. But we'll talk about the Hawks now. More fantastic. Sicily, fantastic again. Newcombe, fantastic game. We could keep going. It's.
I thought Battle had a much improved game on opening round.
Mm-hmm. He did. I think Barras is fitting really nicely in the back line as well. Marbior had a good old game as well. He was he's so funny. I love watching him play because he seems like he's such a. We mentioned this last week as well. It feels like such a different player to the rest of them. It just seems like everyone else is go go go, and he's just like, okay, I'm pretty chill. I'm just gonna hang around here. I'll do a bit of a run, do a challenge, and then I'm just gonna chill for a bit when you guys come down here.
But he is so naturally gifted.
Yeah,
gotcha. He causes this enormous disruption. I actually think Hawthorn would be worse off with an Oscar Allen in their team. As weird as it sounds, I think Allen is demonstrably a better player than Marbia Chol. I think that's fair to say. But the way Chol plays is he can kick a goal and a half a game on average throughout a season and have a quantifiable impact more than Allen going at 2.5 goals a game for Hawthorn, just purely because of the way you can structure that forward line around Marby is so different to almost any other forward in the competition. I think the only ones I can really think of that have been similar to that is Tom Lynch's first season at Richmond when he came down from Gold Coast, where it just seemed to be a case of Revolt can go up and just clear the decks for Lynch and let him cause havoc in that opposition backline. That seems to be working pretty well for them.
Mm-hmm. Nope, good shout. Good win for Hawks. We must move on. We've got so many games to get through, Jesse, and we're going to talk about our team. Saturday, March 15 at GMHBA Stadium, Geelong 23-9, 147. Took the pants down of the Fremantle Dockers 10-9, 69. Oh boy. So listen, outside of a somewhat decent third quarter.
Yeah.
This was like the third quarter for Freo showed what they can do. They had run. They had gun. They were hitting targets with their handballs. They were confident. That was one quarter. The other three, they had absolutely no clue what they were doing. And part of that's because Geelong were just rampant. They did not let Freo get anything going. Like Freo rely on a run and gun style of football. And guess what? You take that out, what's plan B, Justin Longmuir? There isn't a plan B. There was nothing. Freo did not know what to do. And kudos to Geelong because they smelt blood in the water literally from the first bounce and took full advantage of that. To have a 9-goal second, I think it was, and then a 10-goal fourth is horrible. Horrible. Not for Geelong, obviously. For Freo, it was absolutely astounding. Now, and I don't care how many injuries we've got. I don't care. We have depth. But are we picking the right players? Probably not. Is there a plan for when our first plan isn't going to plan? I said plan a lot there, and I said it again. No, there's not. And the proof has been in the pudding for, unfortunately, 5 years and one game. with Justin Longmuir. What's changed? Like, what's changed? I'm just so glad we played that vanilla footy in the Indigenous game, Jesse, because we didn't give our game plans away. Because just imagine if we had. Oh my word. The competition would be shaking in their boots. Anyway, credit to Geelong. Holmes was fantastic. Dangerfield was winding back the clock. DeConning was great. Again, with Geelong, you could keep going because they were hunting that ball. They wanted to win this game. Freo were chasing around the ball like they were toddlers in a park. It was, wow, I got more worked up than I thought I was going to. And that's before you even have a chance to speak, Jesse. Wowee. Boy, oh boy. That's unlike me. Your turn.
Hi, Liam.
Hello, Jesse.
Let's start with Geelong.
Should I put the Jesse timer up here?
No, that's fine. I can self-regulate this. Let's start with the positive for Geelong because, like any good fast bowler, we're going to run up before we deliver that absolute bouncer. Bailey Smith didn't make your best, Leah, but I thought he was phenomenal throughout the entire game.
He was.
Tom Stewart, you could also throw in there as well, rotating through centre bounce and out into halfback was excellent too. I thought Shannon Neal had a real presence about him as well. He didn't necessarily have a massive impact on the scoreboard, neither did Jeremy Cameron. So I think that's a really big tick for Geelong, is that they didn't have monstrous scoreboard output from their two keys, and yet they've won by almost 80 points. And if it wasn't for a child, they would have won by 100.
Yes.
Which is a huge effort. And that really does show Geelong on home turf in season 2025, really wherever, it doesn't matter where they're playing, are going to be an excellent side. And
why?
I think justifying...
Why can't they just be bad? Just 1 year. Why can't they just be bad for 1 year, Jesse?
Well, apparently they're getting Ugle-Hagan now, so they're going to get even better probably, which is nice. So that's good for them. There was two teams on the park, though, and that may come as a shock to those who actually did watch the game. It wasn't 22 Geelong players and 22 purple traffic cones. I thought there was some positives for Fremantle.
Of course.
I thought the most underappreciated and bizarrely hated player of the team, Matthew Johnson, had an excellent game. People seem to confuse taking time and getting the correct disposal with not having an idea what he's doing. Irritates me no end. I think he's a really good user of the ball. And you have something to say here?
I do, because it reminded me of a point that I wanted to make about Freo on this particular occasion.
Okay.
Johnson was doing that. He was taking time. He was assessing his situation. The rest of the team seemed to be one or two steps behind where they should have made the decision. They were very slow. And so, you know, when you watch something, and it's like when you watch the F1, it's a matter of a tenth of a second. Freo were that tenth of a second behind everything, because if they got rid of it a step before, it would have been running and gunning. But they didn't. They held on to it for just that bit too long, and Geelong, bang, got him.
It was like watching 22 Ethan Hugheses.
Yeah, it was a frustrating watch, because I just get rid of it, and the confidence just dropped off. That's all I wanted to say in relation to that. Please continue.
I thought O'Driscoll had a really good game as well. Obviously, Murphy Reid, what more needs to be said? I think this is weird because I don't want to dunk on a kid who's kicked 4 goals in his debut and almost dragged his team back into the game. But he really didn't do much outside of that. So there's clear KPIs, I feel, for Murphy Reid to work on moving forward. And he may not get time in the forward line consistently moving forward, with Shea Bolton set to come back in the side as well in the coming weeks. So how he goes with that will be quite interesting. But I think obviously an incredible game and an incredible moment as well, watching goal after goal after goal sail through by him. It was quite remarkable.
It was a nice little thing to watch. And, you know, we were down by 10 goals and it got us within 21 points at 3/4 time, Jesse. Like that should have been, for a good team, a momentum shifter.
Yep. And I flamed Sydney for exactly this last week. Mm-hmm. Good sides with that level of momentum. I mean, Sydney just kind of stopped and slowly fell to the ground. Fremantle just disintegrated. Yeah. Embarrassingly disintegrated. Now, let's talk about the negatives here. And I am conscious of time, but there is also lots of negatives. Why was Heath Chapman the sub? Chappie is not particularly fast. He's a perfect one-on-one matchup for Jeremy Cameron. Why was he the sub?
Although Drapes did do quite well on Jeremy Cameron.
Drapes did, but I think you can move around the Magnus a lot more efficiently with someone like Warner as the sub. Now, Warner did not have a very good game. Apparently, he's been the big improver in the offseason. If that's the case, then I'm a little bit concerned about the steps everyone else has taken. I thought Tracy and Amiss had dirty days. Tracy at least competes. Jai looks completely bereft of confidence.
He does.
To the point where I'm really worried about him. Now, he looks like he's physically improved, but he just looks like he wants to be anywhere but kicking for goal at the moment, which is really hard for a key forward. But Tracy was good. I don't think Jackson particularly covered himself in glory. I didn't feel.
No, I don't think so either. And look, we will leave it there because we've got to move on.
I have one more point because we need to talk about the tactics of this game.
Okay, you've got a minute. Jesse, Total Eclipse of the Dart is starting right now. Go.
Okay. Tactically, from Justin Longmuir, that was shambolic, and for him to come out and say that the players weren't ready is an insult. Because, and I understand the premiership isn't won in March. This isn't the St Kilda fan podcast. But unfortunately, you need to be playing for premiership points across the entire season. Now, yes, this is a very early start to the season, but I don't want to hear all this dribble about training in 40-degree heat, in putting in the yards this preseason. I didn't see anything in this preseason. They've gone backwards since the collapse last year. Mm-hmm. You've got the same role players not playing their role and being objectively rubbish footballers. You've got consistent issues across the board. And you've got a coach that seems to be, dare I say, too arrogant to accept the fact that he's got it wrong and he can't coach this list with any level of command. I mean, you look at the way they played their football. That was boring football. And I've never once had an issue with boring football. So long as boring football is successful football.
Yeah.
You don't have the list for that. So try something else. Yeah, that's all.
Try something else is probably the way to go. But Freo have a chance to bounce back against the next team we're going to talk about, who's started the year with 2 losses now. Saturday at the SCG, Sydney 12-10-82, defeated by the Brisbane Lions 12-14-86. 0-2 for the Swans. They're going to be pretty keen to get on the board next week against Freo, and as I'm sure Freo are going to want to bounce back from that disaster class on Saturday. 34,906 at the G. I suppose it is a version of the G. It is the G. It is the G. It's the S of the SG. Jesse, I didn't get a chance to watch this one, so this one is actually all on you. What can you tell me about the Sydney Lions versus Brisbane game?
A really good contest, I think, for the most part. Lots of momentum shifts. It did feel like Sydney came out with a real point to prove it and started accordingly in that regard, of course, having been belted in this matchup last year in the big one. But I think across the board, Brisbane, to me, this was a real backs against the wall victory. Very disruptive preparation. You've lost your key forwards, so you have to restructure your team. Speaking, of course, of Joe Danaher. They got it done. And they grounded out against a side that has had 6 months with this match marked in their calendar, or 5 months with this match marked in their calendar, to say we are going to win this game of football at all costs. Now, I thought Sydney were fine. I thought they were good for most parts of the game, but I think we're starting to see the real cracks in this Sydney side. And it's things that I pointed out in the preseason and coming out of opening round last week, where there's a fragility around this Swans side. It's been a mentally grueling 3 years for this playing group. You speak of the 2022 grand final loss at the hands of Geelong, dropping out of contention in 23, getting back there in 24 only to get humiliated when being the consensus team all season, and then your coach leaves. There's big changes. They've kept an inside guy in that head coaching chair, but ultimately, this is a disrupted Sydney side, and the games that they were eking out victories in last year may not be so easy to come by in season 2025.
For sure. All right. Well, be interesting to see what happens next week. Shall we move on, Jesse? Next game?
Levi Ashcroft, what a debut! But yes, we can.
Yes. There's actually quite a few good debuts across the week. Levi Ashcroft. We'll chuck Bruce in there. Harley Reid. Yeah.
Oh no.
No, I don't. Haven't I? I keep getting Murphy Reid. Why is he? What's Murphy? That's not a first name. And I called him Bruce. Chalk it up.
That's his nickname. No, Bruce is his nickname, so I can give you a pass on that.
All right, cool. It's because I've got bloody Hartley on the brain because I'm going to speak about him later. Crikey Moses. And then, of course, Lawler and most of the
Kako.
Kako, yeah, he was great too. So it's good to see some of the young talent coming through as well. Let's move on to Saturday night. We have the Footscray Bulldogs 17-11, 113, defeating the Kangaroos 14-13, 97 at Marvel in front of 34,406. Not a bad crowd for Marvel, I must admit. Look, it was a bit of a plucky battle of attrition, this one. Obviously, Dogs are supremely undermanned. But, you know, I think they held their own against the Kangaroos, who gave it a crack, but unfortunately don't seem to have progressed too far from last year. From the end of last year, Kangaroos always giving it always up for a crack, always up for a fight, but not having quite enough to get the job done. Very, very similar in this game. There obviously wasn't the last quarter capitulation that we saw for a lot of the time with the Kangas last year. But for the most part, I think it was a fairly even game of footy that the Bulldogs just came away the victors. Interesting to see where both teams go from here. Obviously, you've got Cleary, who's going to be out for a bit, I would assume. I'm not too sure how old mate Archer pulled up with his knee. He looked pretty sore, and then ran off the field. So I was like, okay. Sheezer was great, as he was. Bailey Dale was fantastic for the Bulldogs. But yeah, Jesse, did you catch any of this one? Anything you want to add before we move on?
I was on MCG duty for Saturday night watching the other game. But from what I saw of this, look, I think I'm not so sure I'm going to quite dive into your level, Liam, in terms of the criticism of North. I think they are progressing. I don't agree that they're not progressing. What we're seeing from North now is a case of this probably would have been a 6-goal loss last year.
Yeah.
It's now a 3-goal loss against, and yes, I know the Dogs were depleted, but they're a good side and they're a generally pretty well-coached side. They were in it for 4 quarters. They'll be able to turn over sides around them. I think they can still get themselves 6 wins, 7 wins this season. Finn O'Sullivan debuted off half-back. I think this is a really good opportunity for him. He can do it in the Sheezel way, which is just build up that time slowly. We see the benefits in being able to rotate good midfielders off half-back from the way he played and the efficiency he showed with the ball by foot. I think this is a good sign for the future from him.
Very good. Let's move on to Saturday night. This is the game that you got to watch, this absolute shellacking. What a difference a week makes. Collingwood, 21-10, 136, defeating the Port Adelaide Power 6-9. 45? Okay. Sure thing. Why not? 63,282 into the G for this one, which just goes to show the pulling power of Collingwood. Because when you can get that big of a crowd for a interstate team coming into the MCG, I think it was a similar crowd when I went a couple of years ago to watch Collingwood play Freo. It was a big, big crowd. It speaks to the size.
People love to rubbish Collingwood fans, and you know they're a loud, boisterous bunch, but they turn up to the games.
They do. And trust me, when I went there in my Freo scarf, I got to speak to a lot of them. I say speak. The most of them just kind of looked at me like, what the hell are you doing here? You can't be in the MCC.
At least you're like 6'83" and not like 5'1" like me.
Oh,
so you get the element of don't come near me, please.
Yeah, me smiling, big huggable fella. Like, hey guys, I'm here for the game. Yeah, that's definitely me, Jesse. What a brute force of a man I am. Go on, give us the lowdown. I think a lot of the players from Collingwood decided they actually like to play football compared to last week. Crikey Moses, what a difference. What a difference.
Yeah, one-sided game. You'll recall, Liam, I said last week that I wouldn't necessarily write off Tim Membry on the back of his debut against GWS. He turned up, chipped 3 goals in the first quarter, made me look quite correct with that one. He does add an extra layer of dynamism to that Collingwood forward line, which I think is something they've desperately needed coming out of the last couple of seasons. So big tick for him. Dan Houston, well, if there ever was going to be a way to debut for your new club against your old club, he gave them an absolute pasting.
The revenge game.
Really exactly. Really good user of the ball by foot, as we know he is, and he showed why Collingwood was so desperate to sign him coming out of last year. Nick Dacos, very good. Josh Dacos had a good game as well. I think defensively, they absolutely dominated. But problems for Port, to say the least. I mean, yes, there was no Zach Butters, but Zach Butters isn't going to reverse a 15-goal margin. They were woeful, Port Adelaide. They kicked the first goal of the game, or one of the first 2 goals in the game, and registered 5 goals after that. It was dreadful. They kicked the lowest score across any team throughout the round by a reasonable margin. Given other games were played in driving rain, that's quite inexcusable. Travis Boak, who is 34, was clearly one of their best players. That's a problem straight away. No, absolutely no knock on Boak. He's one of my favourite non-Freo players in the comp and has been for many years. But, gee, there were some real passengers on that side. Georgiades, we talk about him a lot on this podcast, but he is simply not the answer for Port Adelaide. And the sooner they can get on with it and find someone who is, the better.
But who are they going to bring in? Because obviously Marshall's not going to play for most this year. Who else?
Well, that's the problem. They're stuck with him for 2025. So he either has to become good, or Port are going to continue to struggle to put 12 goals on the scoreboard, which I think looking at a lot of the games this week outside of the absolute shellackings, I think 12 goals is your magic number. If he can kick 12 goals or more with consistency, you will win. I won't say more games than you'll lose, because you might have a team with just rubbish defense, but you should be able to win at least 10 games if you're kicking 12 goals a game.
Yeah. Very, very good. Let's move on to Sunday. Let's start off Sunday with another bit of wasn't as much of a shellacking, but it was still a pretty dominant performance by your Adelaide Crows. Sunday, March 16 at Adelaide Oval. Adelaide 21-9, 135, defeating St Kilda 10-12-72 in front of 42,895 at Adelaide Oval. Jesse, I must admit,
Yes.
I didn't watch this game or the next one. I watched the last game of the round, but I was very busy watching the Melbourne GP. So this is basically all on you, good sir. Tell me a bit about this game.
Well, I don't know why you were watching doctors in the streets of Melbourne, Liam. That's kind of weird. But as for this game of football...
You idiot. yeah. Good one.
Hey,
it took me a second.
I allegedly promised you comedy at the top of this show. I'm not living up to that.
Listen, it took me a second. It was a creeper. I was just like, what? Oh, gotcha.
This is a worry for the Saints. And if there's anything I can use to paint the picture, it's one statistic I'm going to use. So Sid Draper made his debut for the Adelaide Football Club on Sunday. Now, keep in mind, Draper was the player that I was probably the most excited for coming out of that draft class. I thought it was a big ceiling on him. And I think it was a victim of the being not Vic Metro tax, of course, being a native South Australian. So Draper debuts as the sub. He gets 8 disposals, having come on in the latter part of the third quarter. 8 disposals. Honestly, good, and he looked like a really solid player. Brad Hill played almost the entirety of the game for the St Kilda Football Club on $900,000 a year and got 6 disposals.
Yeah.
Until that is sorted out for St Kilda, they're not going to be a serious football team. Their 3 best players that you've listed, one is admittedly a very good piece of business that they've brought in with Jack Macrae. They've come in. We know what we're going to get with Jack Macrae. He's an accumulator. He gets the ball forward. It's up to the rest. He played that role to perfection and looks like a really good pickup for the Saints. Wanganeen Miller is 50-50 to stay. And with performances like this against the club that's most interested in getting him, that's probably going to get closer to 60-40 by the quarter as that game was unfolding. And Wilson, a good draft pickup, but I think if he's consistently in your best, there's problems further up the field. Jack Steele is a captain of this football club. Steele managed 19 disposals, attending just about every centre bounce for St Kilda. That's not good enough from your leaders. We knew they were going to struggle to score with or without Max King this season, but they're completely bereft of threat up forward without Max King. They looked completely all at sea. The biggest alarm bells for me, though, with St Kilda was the amount of times they were caught 2-on-1, 3-on-1, out the back, completely exposed. This is a Ross Lyon team. I can probably count on one hand the amount of times that in the good years with Ross, so 2012 to 2015, that was happening. And you'd have, say, Zach Dawson against 3 opposition players. It just wouldn't happen. That's not how Ross Lyon coaches his teams. So I think for me, that was my biggest takeaway for St Kilda is my God, this does not look like a Ross Lyon team. Which, given he's been extended now to the end of 2027, is a crippling identity crisis for the St Kilda Football Club.
A few interesting coach extensions that have happened so far this year. I wouldn't have thought that anything the Saints have done since Rossi's been back would warrant such an extension. But I guess you mentioned it last week. I guess
stability and the ability to, in theory, recruit players on the basis that this is the way the club will be set up for the next 3 years. You know, you want guys like Wanganeen Miller to stay. You want to bring in top-end talent, which St Kilda made it very clear that's what they want to do. You need stability. And I think that's why clubs like Geelong and Sydney are successful in those pursuits, because they are stable. Even looking at West Coast under Adam Simpson for the majority, a stable football club. Just quickly on Adelaide, they looked very good. Their ball movement looks to have improved tenfold. Even taking into account the fact that St Kilda clearly were not on it, I thought their ball move was excellent. Isaac Rankin has the potential to be the most damaging player in the competition, and I think the time of sleeping on Isaac Rankin as a footballer is being left in 2024. He looks like he is ready for a serious breakout year. Sid Draper won't be the sub next week either. I think he'll be attending centre bounces with a level of frequency going in from round 2 and beyond.
One of the teams I'm looking forward to watching their progression the most this year is the Adelaide Crows, so looking forward to next week. Let's move on to the second last round, game of the round. One that I was a lot closer than I was expecting. I won't lie. Sunday, March 16th at the MCG, Melbourne 11-8-74, going down in a close one to the Giants 11-11-77. Bit of a wet one in Melbourne on Sunday. Not too sure if that played a part in the close game and the close nature of this game. 23,278 at the G, which makes it look like an empty bowl. Jesse, you watch this one. Please go ahead and let us know about this game and the wetness of it. That didn't sound right at all.
No. Please apologise.
No. Go
on. First of all, you've missed Finn Brownlow Callaghan off the best players down there, Liam, which is a bit of a shame for Tibbers because once again, he was probably best on ground. Mm-hmm. Looks like he looks to have taken.
I just want to mix it up. Give other people a chance, you know.
Fair enough. I thought Callaghan was excellent. I mean, Cogs, Whitfield and Green all had very good games for GWS. As for Melbourne, I think Gorn, Petrarca and Viney is fair for their best. This was another case of I think Melbourne really were going all out and it disrupted the Giants. And we said this in the previous show, Liam, where we said these are the type of games that the Giants can struggle with. It's games where they're clearly fancied. They're facing solid but not spectacular opposition, but they're facing experienced opposition. And there was no tsunami at all to speak of. Having seen it be an absolute one-sided affair at NG the previous week against Collingwood, it was like watching a completely different side for the most part. They got the job done. Cadman lifted, I think, which is really important for them as well. Sammy Taylor at the other end. It's a pretty strong spine for the Giants, but they're missing a ruckman. And I think the ability for Gawn to have a party on the MCG for 3 hours in the ruck allowed this to be a close game. It's going to be a problem for the Giants the longer they're having these big men issues. If they're not drafting in mid-season, the best available, they've missed the trick.
I did breathe a sigh of relief when the Giants got up because I had my full 9 confidence points on them winning. So when they got over, I was just like, happiest of days. Final game, Jesse, let's bring this thing home. Another shellacking, just to bring it home. At Optus Stadium, the West Coast Eagles 7-7-49, defeated by the Gold Coast Suns. Are my vibes back, Jesse? 2016-136 in front of a very healthy 46,532 at Optus. They'll always bring a crowd, the Eagles, but if they keep dishing out this gaff, trash, then it's going to be quite a long season once again. I shouldn't actually say that. It's not very nice. Gaff did have his little, ceremony for his retirement, so I probably shouldn't liken the two, but I said what I said. Let's talk about this game, Jesse. The Suns looked really good, really good. Took Miller was running amok. So was old Matty Rowell. King up forward, the Ben variety, taking screamers, taking hangers, kicking goals, 5 goals. Could probably teach his brother a thing or two. It was quite a disappointing game because both of us tipped the Eagles to win this.
Yeah.
Because I think both of us expected a lot more, probably more from the Eagles. And
I think call a spade a spade here. It wasn't a little bit disappointing. It was really disappointing. I think there has been a narrative that this is a new era for the West Coast Football Club. And look, I don't think I'm going to be necessarily overly criticised by West Coast fans for saying this, given I'm simply echoing many of their fan base and the general media here. Yes, obviously, as a Freo fan, it's easy to say, oh, look, he's just hanging shit on his crosstown rivals while they're down. I think I've been fairly consistent and balanced in my thoughts on West Coast on this podcast. They were awful. It was up there with their performance against Sydney in 2023 at the SCG in terms of just a complete disengagement from what it takes to be a professional footballing side. There were solid players out there and players that were trying, but there were players that I genuinely did not feel were trying. And that is hugely alarming in round one of a season. And I think we can call players out here. Tim Kelly has rightly copped a lot of criticism out of this game. He was miles below his best. Now, this is a player who came out, I think, fairly boldly during the off-season and declared that he had fallen out of love with football in his time at West Coast. You're not doing anything to say that you found it back. He was non-existent for the majority of this game. Don't want to be too harsh on a player like Harry Edwards, but he was given an absolute bath by Ben King. Couldn't go with him. Could not go with him at all. I think Oscar Allen was the victim of just having not a lot of help around him. Waterman with the calf injury, that's another big concern for West Coast. You know, he is their goal-kicking outlet. Where does that lead him? He looked admittedly very dangerous when he was around that ball, and when he flushed it from 50 out early, you were thinking he's going to be the one. If West Coast are going to be competitive in this game, he's going to be the one. They weren't competitive in this game, and he's now every possibility to not play next week against the reigning premiers. You know, that's really alarming. And we haven't even come to probably the biggest talking point out of West Coast, which is Harley Reid.
Wow.
Now, I think it's important to quantify expectations and reality here, because there is an over expectation on Harley Reid. A lot of that is fanned by the local media here in Western Australia, where Harley has, I think, unfairly been portrayed as the Messiah. What we saw on Sunday was a player not focused. Harley Reid was not focused on his KPIs and his individual performance objectives as a player in that team. We saw a farcical flop when Charlie Ballard touched him.
He had a couple.
We saw numerous attempts to wrestle Matty Rowell for no apparent reason. It was a distraction, and Harley Reid has become a distraction for West Coast. It's a distraction for McQualter to go into every press conference now and answer questions about Harley Reid, which now leads this real problem of, has Harley Reid either gotten the mentality of being bigger than the club?
That, or he just desperately does not want to be there. Like, I don't know if there's any. I think it's one of those two things. It could be, and both things could be true, and both things could be false. But when you're coming in to halftime, getting absolutely spanked, there's a little bit of a push and shove, and you try and get yourself involved, and then walk off the ground having a chin wag and a giggle with Flynn. It goes to show the level of seriousness he was taking any of that in terms of an actual game.
That's not all on Harley Reid, though. Obviously, he is the driving point of that. But that's on your senior leaders. That's on your coaching staff. You know, I understand that Andrew McQualter is newer to the club than Harley Reid is, but that needs to be knocked on the head straight away. That can't be allowed to propagate under your tenure as a senior coach.
Then maybe you're right, Jesse. Then maybe you're right. Maybe it's a case of that he thinks he's too big to get that feedback. Maybe it is that. But we could go on. We could speculate. But we are pushing the end of this episode. We must wrap it up. We must wrap it up, Jesse. Shall we wrap it up?
Let's. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the Centimetre Perfect AFL podcast. Make sure you are liking, sharing, subscribing, telling your friends, telling your family, telling your colleagues at work to tune in to the Centimetre Perfect AFL podcast every week. If you are one of our podcast listeners, make sure you jump on over to YouTube for our Just the Tips edition. If you're already on YouTube, just click somewhere. There. I don't know. I'm pointing at random parts of the screen. I'm sure you'll find it. You managed to find this. I'm sure you can find just the tips. Until next week, we'll speak to you soon on the Centimetre Perfect AFL podcast.
Bye, everybody.